a call to retreat, reset, and rise again stronger. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear, not forever, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. There comes a moment in life when the noise is too loud, the expectations too heavy, and the distractions too costly. And in that moment, disappearing isn't running away, it's coming home. It's time to disappear from the constant need to explain yourself, from the endless cycle of seeking validation, from people who love your potential but not your boundaries. Disappear into silence, into solitude, into self, because in the quiet you meet your truest voice. In the stillness you hear the whisper of who you really are, beyond the roles, the likes, the masks. Growth doesn't always happen in the spotlight. Sometimes it blooms in the dark, in the seasons when no one sees you. But God, and that is enough. Let them wonder where you went. Let them think you fell off. Because when you reappear, you'll be wiser, sharper, stronger, and unshakable. So yes, it's time to disappear, not to hide, but to transform. Disappearing is often misunderstood. People think it's a sign of weakness, of quitting or running away. But in truth, disappearing can be the boldest strategy of all. It takes immense strength to step back from a world that constantly demands your attention, energy, and performance. We're conditioned to believe that visibility equals value, that being seen, liked, and praised is the only path to progress, but the most powerful growth often happens in the quiet. Disappearing is not giving up, it's tuning out the noise so you can tune into your purpose. There comes a time when your soul needs space to breathe, when your mind craves clarity and your heart aches for stillness. In those moments, disappearing is an act of rebellion against burnout, comparison, and emotional overload. It's a conscious decision to step away from anything and anyone that disturbs your peace or distorts your identity. You're not retreating out of fear. You're retreating to fortify. Just like an army withdraws not to surrender, but to regroup, reload, and return stronger, you too disappear with intention. Disappearing is strategic. It allows you to clear away the voices that drown your own, to detach from patterns that no longer serve you, and to rediscover the fire within. When you disconnect from the world, you reconnect with your truth. And in that space, free from performance, pressure, and pretense, you begin to remember who you are without the masks. You confront your wounds, listen to your spirit, and let healing happen. The process is not loud, not public, not fast, but it is real and it is yours. Others may not understand. They may call you distant, changed, or absent. Let them. They're not supposed to understand your transformation. Growth is sacred, and not everyone deserves front row seats to your becoming. Disappearing teaches you to be selective about your energy, your time, and your access. You learn to stop over-explaining, stop pleasing, and stop performing. You learn that boundaries are holy and your peace is non-negotiable. When you reemerge, it will be as a version of you that no longer apologizes for taking up space, a version that no longer settles for half love, half truths, or half living. Disappearing gives birth to your wholeness. It reminds you that you were never lost. You were just buried under layers of expectation. So don't be afraid to disappear for a while. Sometimes disappearing is exactly what your soul needs to rise again, clearer, bolder, and more alive than ever. You didn't give up, you grew up, and that changes everything. Growth requires isolation. This is a truth many people overlook in a world that's constantly telling us to stay connected, stay visible, and stay relevant. But real transformation, the kind that shifts your spirit, strengthens your mind, and heals your heart, almost never happens in the spotlight. It happens when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, and when no one is offering you validation or praise. Just like a seed breaks open underground, far away from the light, Your deepest evolution begins in silence and solitude. You don't grow just because you're seen. You grow because you've done the unseen work. You've wrestled with your doubts, faced your fears, and confronted your inner shadows in the quiet corners of your soul. Isolation isn't emptiness. It's a sacred space where all the noise of the world fades away and your true voice becomes clearer. It's where you stop pretending, stop performing, and finally get honest with yourself. In isolation, there's no need to impress anyone, no pressure to be perfect, and no distractions pulling you away from your purpose. It's uncomfortable, yes, but discomfort is the soil where growth takes root. It's the silence that forces you to listen deeply, the stillness that makes you see things you've been running from, and the loneliness that teaches you how to become whole on your own. We've been taught to fear being alone. We associate it with abandonment, rejection, or failure. But some of the most powerful breakthroughs in life happen when you are completely alone. That's when you stop relying on the opinions of others to define you. That's when you stop chasing external rewards and start nurturing internal peace. When no one is around to distract you, that's when you discover who you really are. You face your insecurities not with judgment, but with compassion. You stop asking for permission to heal, to change, to rise, and instead you give yourself the freedom to become who you were meant to be. This kind of growth doesn't make headlines. It doesn't happen on stages or social media feeds. It's quiet, it's private, it's powerful, and it's necessary, because if you don't grow in isolation, you'll crumble under exposure. You have to be rooted in truth before you can rise in purpose. Just like no one sees the seed cracking open underground, no one will see the tears, the prayers, or the battles you face in the dark. But they will see the result. They'll see the strength, the clarity, and the confidence you carry when you re-emerge. And they'll think you just bloomed overnight, but you'll know the truth. You didn't bloom by accident. You bloomed because you were willing to go into the dark. You grew because you embraced isolation, not as punishment, but as preparation. And now you're ready. Silence is often misunderstood in a world that constantly values noise, movement, and multitasking. We are told to keep going, to stay busy, to chase success as fast as we can. But what no one tells us is that real clarity, deep soul-level clarity, can't be found in the chaos. It doesn't come from rushing, reacting, or constantly being surrounded by people and opinions. It comes from silence. And in that silence, something incredible happens. You begin to hear the voice that has been drowned out by the noise of the world, not the voice of your critics, not the voice of your fears, but the voice of your soul. The one that whispers truth, direction, healing, and purpose. That voice is always speaking, but we are often too distracted to listen. When you intentionally step away from the noise, you start to reconnect with yourself in a way that feels almost sacred. The silence becomes a mirror. It reflects your truth back to you, uncut, unfiltered, raw. You may not always like what you see at first. You may hear doubt, anger, or grief rise to the surface, but that's part of the process. Silence doesn't just bring peace. It also brings awareness. It forces you to stop hiding from the parts of yourself you've avoided. And in facing them, you start to heal, you start to understand, you start to grow. This kind of stillness is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the conscious choice to stop running and start listening, because sometimes the answers we seek aren't found in doing more, they're found in doing less. In being still, in surrendering the urge to fix everything instantly. Silence teaches you to trust the pause, to stop expecting life to make sense at full speed, to stop depending on the opinions of others to feel whole. It teaches you how to simply be, with yourself, with your thoughts, and with God, And in that space, something begins to shift. The confusion starts to clear. The anxiety begins to quiet. The decisions you were struggling with no longer feel as heavy. You start to feel a steady sense of knowing deep inside, a direction that isn't forced or loud, but gentle and true. That's the voice of your soul. That's the part of you that always knew the way, but couldn't be heard until everything else was turned down. So if life feels overwhelming, if you've been searching for clarity, or if you feel like you're losing yourself in the noise of the world, it's time to be still. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Silence is where the soul speaks loudest. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for your attention. It waits, patiently, until you're ready to listen. And when you do, you'll realize the wisdom you were looking for was always inside you, waiting to be heard. We live in a world that constantly tells us who we should be. From the moment we're young, expectations are placed on us. How to speak, how to look, how to act, and even how to feel. We start wearing roles like masks, trying to be the version of ourselves that others find acceptable, pleasing, or impressive. We become what they expect, not what we truly are. We learn to shrink in some rooms and perform in others. But at some point, this performance becomes too heavy to carry. The more you play the role, the more disconnected you become from the core of who you really are. You begin to feel a deep inner ache, a kind of spiritual fatigue, not because you are weak, but because your soul is tired of pretending. There is a sacred power in deciding to disappear from who you've been expected to be. It is not abandonment of responsibility. It is the beginning of freedom. It's the moment you stop trying to please everyone and start honoring the truth of your own voice. Disappearing from those roles, those labels, those suffocating expectations is not the end of you. It is the rediscovery. It's where you begin to shed the masks one by one until what's left is something real, something raw, and something holy, your authentic self. You realize you were never meant to be boxed in, to be tamed, or to be molded into someone else's comfort. You were meant to live in alignment with your spirit, not in performance for the world. When you disappear from the expectations others have built around you, it can feel lonely at first. People will not always understand. Some will resist your change, some may even criticize it because the version of you that made them comfortable is fading. But let them be uncomfortable. You are not living to keep others at ease, you are living to be whole. And that wholeness requires truth. It requires boundaries. It requires a quiet rebellion against everything false. The disappearance is not forever. It is a sacred retreat, a deep inward journey that allows you to return, not as who the world wanted, but as who your soul has always been. When you reappear, you will do so differently. You'll speak with more clarity, walk with more confidence, love with more depth, and stand with more grace. You won't need applause to feel worthy. You won't need permission to take up space. You won't shrink to make others feel big. You'll show up as someone who has been to the depths of their own truth and chosen to live by it. And that kind of presence changes rooms, changes relationships, and changes lives. So let go. Let go of who they expected you to be. Disappear if you must, but do it with purpose, so you can reemerge as the person you were always meant to be. Not everyone deserves access to your becoming. This is one of the hardest truths to accept when you're on a journey of healing and transformation. We grow up thinking that the people who started with us will walk with us through every stage of our evolution. But the reality is, some people are not meant to witness your becoming, not because they are bad, but because they are not equipped to understand the version of you that is emerging. Your growth, your healing, your quiet transformation. It is sacred, and sacred things must be protected. You cannot expose the deepest parts of your change to people who only knew how to love the version of you that stayed small, agreeable, and predictable. Becoming more of who you truly are means you will sometimes have to let go of the people, places, and environments that are no longer aligned with where you're headed. This doesn't mean you're better than others. It means you are honoring the process that is changing you from the inside out. Healing is not linear. It is fragile at times, private at most, and misunderstood by many. That's why boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but filters to keep your transformation protected. You're not hiding, you're safeguarding. There's a difference. When a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it does so in a cocoon, alone, undisturbed. The process cannot be rushed, and it cannot be witnessed. If someone were to tear open the cocoon too early, they would destroy the entire transformation. The same is true for you. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to the process of your becoming. Sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is silence. It is disappearing, not because you are broken, but because you are becoming whole. You begin to realize that your energy is sacred, your time is sacred, your healing is sacred. And not everyone has earned the right to experience those things with you. Let them question your silence. Let them talk. Let them wonder why you've changed. That's not your burden to carry. Your only responsibility is to protect your peace and keep growing. The right people will understand. The right people will meet you at the level of your growth. The rest were only meant to be part of your past. And when you come out of this season, when your heart is lighter, your mind is clearer, and your spirit is stronger, you'll look back and realize that disappearing was never about rejection. It was about elevation. It was about making space for the next, truest, boldest version of you to take shape. And now you don't owe anyone explanations. You don't have to apologize for healing. You just keep becoming, quietly, powerfully, and unapologetically, because your becoming is a sacred process, and not everyone deserves access to it.